Item 12 is a briefing on the receipt of the Redistricting Commission report. I will direct questions to the chair and ask her to determine which member will answer the questions. Mr. Stein is here, Ms. Dunn is here, and Ms. Cordier is here.
Yes.
Madam Chair, welcome. Okay, great.
Thank you.
So glad you're here. Thanks for all your hard work. I guess I'll give it to Ms. Dunn to start us off.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. So as the council's aware, and you've now received your report and recommendations from the commission has been hard at work since they were appointed in January, and they have now delivered to you their report and recommendation on a plan for redistricting. And with you today is the chair of the commission, the vice chair. I see that Mr. Edmonds is here as well, and Mr. Stein is here. He was instrumental in helping with the GIS mapping, as it did take a certain level of expertise, even though the application from the planning department was extremely helpful. It wasn't always as easy to use as some might have wanted. So he was actually a great benefit to have somebody with that skill set. Other members of the commission have been invited. We will see who logs in. And with that, I just turn it to the chair, and I thank them for the opportunity to work with them.
Thanks. Can you hold for just a sec? Councilmember Rice wants to get in.
No, this is at the end. I'm sorry.
That was left over. Okay, great. Okay, at the end, you're on the list. Madam Chair, it's all yours. Welcome, Mr. Edwards.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to present this briefing to you of the work that the commission has done. I wanted to let you know that the commissioners that were appointed by the county council were great individuals and did a fantastic job. I'm going to give you a brief review, but I'm going to invite Commissioner Stein to talk about the specifics and answer any questions with specifics to the maps. I'm also available for any questions. So very quickly, good afternoon. The commission conducted 12 meetings in the spring of 2021. The focus of the meetings was to brief the commissioners on county, state, and federal laws. We had a number of, let me start again. We have 11 members that were appointed to the commission. We held 12 meetings. Because we didn't know when the census information was going to drop, I asked to develop for each of the meetings presentations to put all the commissioners on an even knowledge scale to understand what redistricting is and how to do it. We have the first one was the Office of the County Attorney, and they did a fantastic job in providing us the overview of the state federal laws, which is super important because of the issues of gerrymandering. We had the planning department, the folks at the planning department were fantastic. My hat's off to them. We're very lucky to have them. They made this process so much easier than it could have been, and helped us with not only the planning tool, but they also helped to give information about all corners of the county and the population growth, where the growths were occurring. A lot of that information was provided and relied upon by the ACS 2019 information. We also had the Board of Elections to talk about precincts. And one of the presentations that was fantastic was the Brennan Center for Justice that really went through the definitions and helped us to really develop a process that would be transparent and would have ground rules that would really help us to have developing a map that its integrity would be in compliance with all the parameters that are required. If we can go to the next slide. Before I get to this, I just wanted to put it up so you can see how many communities we actually did the outreach. But before we got there, we developed the ground rules. And the ground rules that we came up with from a compilation of all of the presentations that were given was, we understood that equal protection from the 14th Amendment required that we look at the equal population and divide the population equally among the new 7 districts as opposed to the past 5. Compactness was very important to make sure that there's minimum distance between all the parts of the constituency. Contiguity, which, excuse me for my pronunciation, I struggle with that one word, contiguity, which is all parts of the district being connected at some point so that you don't have any strange drawings or sections hanging out. Minority representation, we would consider the areas of population with a majority of minorities. I know a lot of you don't like that phrase, majority of minorities, but it's the census term that is used, and so we adopted that. And more importantly not more importantly, but just as importantly, we took into consideration the county's equal protection clause, applying the race, equity, and social justice policies. We also took into consideration as a ground rule the preservation of municipalities and other political subdivisions. And we took into consideration, our last ground rule was the preservation of communities of interest. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's the geographical areas such as neighborhoods of a city or regions of a state where the residents have common political interests that do not necessarily coincide with boundaries or political subdivisions. And so with those ground rules, we were able to develop a kind of a framework of what we would be looking at when we got to the maps, when the census information was developed. We decided to make an outreach effort to the community, and the commissioners all stepped up and participated. No more than 3 commissioners at any one time participated in one of these to avoid any Open Meeting Act violations or issues. And as you can see, we have 40 meetings that we were able to attend. We had a slideshow that we presented on information that we had received about the laws and the requirements that we shared with the public so they would understand where we're coming from. And for example, we met with the Maryland County Democratic Breakfast Group, the Up County Montgomery County Republican Women's Club. We met with the League of Women Voters and the Minority Legislative Breakfast, just to name a few. We can go to the next slide. On September 13th, the census information was made available to the commissioners through the tool that was developed by Park and Planning. Like I said, they were fantastic and really appreciate all of their help and their tutoring for those of us who were struggling with the tool a little bit because of our own limitations with technology, and the training sessions that they provided. This timeline for the work is on October 6th, from September 13th until October 6th, the commissioners broke up into groups. And as they broke into groups, naturally kind of came together, started developing maps. At that point, we had met and voted on whether or not keeping Gaithersburg and Rockville together, which was very impactful for map development, because by having the 2 kept together, and it was voted to do so based on the input from the elected officials and their preference to be kept together, and so it was voted and majority voted to keep them together. It helped to figure out how the districts were going to turn out. And so the end result was 3 maps were developed and they were reviewed. After the review, we held off on the vote for giving opportunity to take into consideration concerns that had been raised and for the maps to be modified and amended, tweaked. The maps were tweaked and they were presented again on October 20th. And so those revisions were shown during our public meeting and discussed and voted on. And the majority of the commissioners chose the map that you're going to see today. On November 3rd, we were able to get together to finalize the report, which we got a significant amount of assistance from the staff in putting it together. Again, we appreciate that effort and work. And we transmitted on November 3rd after we voted out the report unanimously to the county council. At this point on the next slide, I would like to, for everyone to understand that I left out that including the outreach, we also did receive 400 public comments, and these comments were received after the 3 maps were presented for consideration. So they were included when we were tweaking the maps. So that's an important point to share with everyone. And so here is the map, and I'll ask David Stein, he's one of our commissioners, to specifically describe them for you briefly, and we'll together answer any questions about some of the challenges that we had with developing this map.
Okay, thank you, Mariana, and thank you, council members, for having us today. So here is the commission's map in front of you. We've numbered it. The numbering came late in the process, so I also have trouble remembering which one we call which number, but I have a cheat sheet in front of me. So here are the numbers that we have. If you could go to the next slide, I think it will be easier for me to describe it with the community and municipality lines in the map. So I'm just going to go through these 7 districts, just briefly explain where they are, and go through some of the general demographics of the districts, and talk about a little bit about some of the challenges we have, and then we'll take questions about any particular district or any other issues that council members might have. So I'll start with District 1, which is the red one. That starts in the south at Chevy Chase, actually right outside the municipalities of Chevy Chase, goes up through, takes all of Bethesda, moves up through Potomac, and then takes almost all of Travilla. So that's that red District 1, as opposed to the current District 1, which goes much further up into the up county. This one stops at Travilla. District 2, which is the blue district, is one of our 2 up county districts. So this one starts in North Potomac, and it contains much of the up county communities. It has Darnestown, Poolsville, Clarksburg, Germantown, this whole area. So that is District 2. District 3, Mariana mentioned that we, at the beginning of our, well, not at the beginning of our process, but at the beginning of our map drawing, after we actually got the Census Bureau, the census data, we took a vote as a commission as to whether to keep Rockville and Gaithersburg together, because it was really apparent that that was a major decision in how the rest of the county looked, and the commission voted to keep them together. And so that's District 3. It has Rockville and Gaithersburg, and once it has those in it, that's pretty much population-wise what your district is going to be. So that's District 3. District 4, this is one of the new districts, I would say, that might take a little bit of getting used to. So this district starts in the south in Tacoma Park. It contains all of downtown Silver Spring and the Long Branch community. And then it moves up the transit corridor along the train tracks, and it ends up in North Bethesda. So that's the light blue, that's the District 4. Then District 5, this is the East County District. This is a plurality African-American district, really the first that we've seen in a map in Montgomery County. It starts in Four Corners at the Beltway, and it moves up and contains the East County communities of White Oak and Burtonsville, and it goes north and it stops up around Edna Road. It contains Spencerville, Cloverly, and also Leisure World in the northern part of that district. So that's District 5. And District 6, which is this purple or pink, I don't know what color that is. But this is a district that we've created. It starts in the south in Forest Glen. It contains the communities of Wheaton and Aspen Hill and Glenmont. It goes up in the north, and at the northern end of it has Durwood and Redland. This district is a plurality Hispanic voting district. Again, a first in Montgomery County. Then our last district is District 7, which is the Orange District. This is our other up-county district, but it contains some substantial up-county communities as well as mid-county. So it starts in the north in Damascus, and it contains the up-county communities of Montgomery Village and Cedar Grove. and then it goes down through the mid-county, containing Laytonsville, Goshen, and it ends at the south in Olney, Norbeck, and I was about to say Silver Spring, but that's wrong, Sandy Spring, Ashton. So those are the 7 districts briefly described. If we could go to the next slide. We feel that this map really meets our core principles of what a map should look like. First of all, it meets all of our ground rules that Mariana set out before. The population deviations are within set limits. We tried to keep them to within 5% up or down, so a total variation of 10%, of no more than 10%. We didn't divide municipalities, and the districts are compact and contiguous. Excuse me. The map represents the growth of Black, Hispanic, and Asian communities in our county. It creates 6 districts that are majority people of color. So of the 7 districts that we have, 6 districts are majority people of color. The only one that's not is District 1. It satisfied the commission's decision, I mentioned this before, of unifying Rockville and Gaithersburg. We feel it meets the eye test. The boundaries are logically placed. We use that phrase sometimes, eye test. As I mentioned before, this map makes a plurality African-American district in the East County, that's District 5. This really speaks to a much delayed representation for the people of that county. Number 6, it says it's more than a strong Hispanic representation, it's a plurality Hispanic representation in that District 6, in that district that completely contains Wheaton, Aspen Hill, and Glenmont, which is the strongest concentration of Hispanic voters in our county. It creates an exclusively up-county district that goes all the way from a little bit of Travilla up through Clarksburg, enabling a district focused pretty much exclusively on the up-county. And it has another district that also represents up-county, but contains the up-county and the mid-counties together, providing some representation to the up-county while at the same time not ignoring the mid-county areas of Olney and Sandy Spring and so forth. So we felt those were the core principles that this map meets. If we go to the next slide, as I said, we don't want to have more than a 10% deviation from the smallest district to the biggest district. This is extremely limiting, this fact that we need to keep this in just from a math point of view. It means if you want to move one district, you have to find some other district to move out, because we're trying not to exceed those numbers. And you can see that this does it. The smallest district is the District 6, which is 4% below the ideal number if they were all exactly equal. And the biggest one is District 3, which is at 2.7% higher. So a total deviation of about 7.1%. Next slide. These are the demographics of the population. I'm not big on just raw numbers, so if you could switch to the next one, which gives percentages. So here we can see the percentages of the populations. You can look to see that in District 5, we have a plurality Black district. And in District 6, we have a plurality Hispanic district. We can go on. Next one. Whoop, backwards. Forward. So the voting age populations.
Yeah, sorry, Commissioner Stein, I had put those in, I had hidden those for the time being, so I have to unhide those. Give me a second.
Okay.
Just for.
So I'll just say while she does that, we want, when you're doing districting, you have to balance by the population. That's the law. So we don't want to balance by any other group of the population. But when you want to look at voting power, you need to look at the voting age population as well. Not because you're trying to balance by those numbers, but if you really want to think, have I made a district that has a strong, for instance, Hispanic voting power, you really want to look at the voting age population because children can't vote. So I do think it's important, in addition to those population percentages, that we take a look at the voting age population. Do we have those, Pam?
Yeah, just 1 second. Sorry, I just need to screen share again.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, that screen right there. Okay, and so again, we saw before that, for instance, District 6 had a plurality Hispanic in the population, but we also really want to make sure that it also has a plurality in the voting age population, which you can see it does. Similarly for the African American population in District 5. So those were some of the demographic issues that the commission took into account while we were creating the map. There were some challenges. There were a lot of, let me be honest, there were a lot of challenges in making this map. This was a very challenging round of redistricting because previous iterations of this commission really just had to tweak the maps, because we were going from 5 districts to 5 districts. Once the voters decided to go from 5 districts to 7 districts, that really meant that we're starting anew with a blank slate. And that's really quite challenging. Then of course, we had the really big challenge that the census data came months and months late, which constricted the time that we had to draw the maps, because we didn't have the actual data until months after that we really should have had it. So it was a challenging procedure. But the more, here's the truth. The more lines that you have, the more disagreements that are going to rise. That's inevitable. So certain communities that are on the edge of one district are just going to feel their identities might be better aligned with the next district over. But as one of my fellow commissioners, Laura Ard, said, that the challenge is in the push and the pull of the entire map. That's the real challenge. We might agree that community A would be better off in District X instead of District Y. But moving them to District X might require so many other adjustments in other districts that could be completely in another part of the county. Because some of these adjustments, in order to keep the populations equal with the equal protection law requires us to do, in order to keep the populations equal, some of these just what some might think, well, that's a small community. Moving that community could have major implications all over the county. And I think that that's really the biggest challenge of doing redistricting. I mean, as some of you know, I'm a high school teacher, high school statistics teacher, and I teach redistricting to my students. And I've had this experience of doing this from an academic point of view. But now, like, as my students would say, I'm doing it for reals. And the challenges have just become so much more vivid in my mind that that small changes, which for a given voter who's living in his or her community might seem like, well, of course, why wouldn't you put us in this other district? That can become a really big challenge for the map drawer in order to keep populations the same. And so I think that that's really the biggest challenge that we have. And so when you consider controversies over one small, or not even small, but one given community, I would just ask you to try to consider that in the context of the entire map. And so the map we have created here represents our best thinking of how to create 7 districts which balance the interests of all 1 million plus residents of our county, reflects our diversity, and meets the legal requirements. The majority of our commission thinks that this map is the one that best does that, and we hope that you'll agree. That's what I have, Mariana. If I don't know how we're gonna,
No, the one last comment that I would have for everyone is that it is a compromise map because we did listen to the public, the community, and fellow commissioners who had concerns and pointed out different aspects of the map. And so it is a tweaked map in the sense of some of those comments. If it could be adjusted, we did adjust it. So it is a compromise map. But what I feel proud of this map is that it is also legally compliant. This is a good map that it complies with the laws and the requirements when drawing districts. And so I hope that the council can feels confident in that. And that's why we wanted to share with you how much public outreach we did, how many comments, 400 comments we got after they were displayed and shared. Because we wanted you to understand that we tried to do the absolute best we could to be as fair and equal and just on how these districts were drawn.
yeah, definitely a compromise map. If I were a commissioner one, this district, the map might look different, and I'm sure that's true of any of our commissioners. But we definitely were not commissions of one, and the map that we came up with really does reflect input of all the members of our commission, plus all the hundreds of community comments that we got as well.
So if there's any questions.
Yes, please. Thanks for all your hard work. Ms. Dunn, do you have anything to add at this point? Are we good? Go to
No,
council.
I nothing to add. I'll just turn it back to the chair as she'll help with answering questions.
Sure. First, questions we have from Councilmember Rice to the chair.
Well, thank you very much. And first, let me just say thank you to each and every one of you. This is not easy. I've been through this process before. Back in 2010, when I was first elected to the county council, and we went through redistricting. And I remember then, as you had stated, Mr. Stein, that it was a little bit easier. But it wasn't that easy. I have to say, and Councilmember Navarro, I'm sure will speak to this, but I remember when I first ran, I represented Olney and I represented Poolesville. And so it's interesting that now that's going back into I know it's not exactly the same, but District 2 as to where it kind of started. So it's kind of nostalgic for me in a way. So that's a good thing. But let me just say, in all seriousness, look, it is not easy to do what you did. And I think that you guys have certainly led with integrity in terms of keeping those values that you held true at the very beginning, that you were assigned as there, and also the values of this county. The values as a person who was born and raised here are incredibly important. As we've seen the changes in our county, you've been reflective of that. Now, are and will there be questions about trying to keep some of our communities whole? And I know that many of you have heard that from some of the neighbors in Clarksburg, some of the neighbors in other districts who are concerned about being separated from their fellow folks, even though we don't have cities that are large like what we see with Rockville and Gaithersburg. The reality is that folks still identify as such. And so from that aspect, I certainly understand and appreciate the challenges and the puts and takes that it will that have implications all across the county, not just in 2 neighboring districts. And so I understand that, and I understand the deviations that we need to stick within as well. So we will certainly look and explore ways in which we can continue to tweak on the edges, but we're talking about very minor here. And let me just be very clear. What folks are asking for and what folks are talking about is very minor when it comes to the great work that all of you as commissioners have been able to put forward. And I'm just incredibly proud and appreciative of the product that we have before us. It is a great point of which, we can look to see if there might be some nuanced changes we might be able to make here and there. And if not, so be it. We still have a great product that's in front of us, but certainly something where we want to try and do our due diligence, as I know you've had, and try and see what else we might be able to do there. So my question is just, Ms. Cordier, when it came to that, and I know that you had mentioned about feedback from the community, how did that weigh in balance to what it is that you saw as your charge when it came to those legal responsibilities that you had to do in making sure that you had a map that met those standards?
Well, it was good that we had done the meetings with the briefings beforehand, because there was still up into October, people confused thinking we were drawing the school boundaries and people being very upset about that. And we, to be very clear, this is not school boundaries. But we did listen to Up County about, their desire to have, 2 districts or more representation. We also were very much aware of the historic impact of East County and the need for, racial equality and social justice, and with all of the districts looking to make sure that the communities of interest within each of them were kept together and shared similar issues, causes, and such. So there was a little tug here, pull there, and trying to satisfy all of that. But once we applied and continued to apply the ground rules, it actually kind of started to draw itself in quite a bit, and particularly when we made the decision to keep Gaithersburg and Rockville together, because since that's in the center of the county, it just kind of went from there out. And the population growth. I think there are some surprises and maybe a little bit of not understanding that there has been a lot of population growth, but not all the population growth is where people think it is. And Down County did get, it's more densely populated, and so the districts look a little bit smaller. And then Up County, there was a lot of growth, but that's why they look bigger. So with keeping in line with the equal division of population, that's why the map looks the way it does. And so we really took everything into consideration. We listened to everybody, but like you said, not everyone's going to be happy. And that's when I say, hey, it's a compromise map, because you've got folks that are happy, so folks that aren't happy, and folks who are ambivalent, or kind of in the middle. So we didn't lean in any which way. We just applied the ground rules, and that's what we came up with.
So, Mr. President, back to you. I just want to close by again just thanking each and every one of you. I see many of you that have joined us on the call, and each and every one of you has contributed in your own way and made this something that I think we should all be proud of. So thank you very much for all of your hard work and dedication. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember. Colleagues, I neglected, I have a few official questions I'm supposed to ask, and I think, Ms. Cordier, you addressed a number of them, but you talked about why Rockville and Gaithersburg and the decision to pair them, they're both high growth areas and complete communities, how the decision to pair them sort of determined a lot of the subsequent decisions. Other communities had apparently expressed an interest in remaining whole as well, like Kensington and the Chevy Chases, but that was too challenging. Can you just talk a little bit more about why it was a starting assumption to keep Rockville and Gaithersburg together, aside from the preference of the local elected officials?
There was quite a bit of debate and a few meetings about Gaithersburg and Rockville, and other than the elected officials letting us know their preference, we did ask for community input as to their preferences, and there was no opposition truly. I mean, if anyone was opposed, it was a minority, a very small minority. And the population growth in Gaithersburg and Rockville was in fact perfect. If we kept those two municipalities together, it created a perfect district, if you will, and it was within its lines and the rest. So one of our commissioners, who is a past mayor of Gaithersburg, Commissioner Golshan, was also instrumental in sharing the history of the area, and his position was that we should keep it together. So that's why at the end of the day, after quite a bit of debate, and actually we debated over more than one meeting, we voted, and the majority voted to keep Gaithersburg and Rockville together. And then when we did that, we went from having a possibility of considering 11 different maps with different scenarios to all of a sudden knowing that the maps need to be, thinking that Gaithersburg and Rockville is one district, it all of a sudden reduced the possibilities and probabilities of how it would get drawn, the lines for the boundaries. And so it made mapping process easier for the commissioners. And that was also somewhat of a consideration since we had gotten the information on September 13th. Well, it came 13th, a couple of days after the 13th, we actually, got the information into the tool to be able to use it. And so our timeline, was shortened, and we needed to comply with providing the maps and a report to the county council on time. It made sense.
Okay, thanks. Given the demographic goals of the committee, where's the largest Hispanic or Latino population by zip code, and how did that inform the mapping?
David, do you want to take that?
The 20902.
Well, we didn't map by zip code. So we weren't working with that. We were working with communities. The largest Hispanic community, the largest density of Hispanic voters, of Hispanic population is in the Wheaton,
Right.
Glenmont, Aspen Hill area. There are other parts of the county that have higher percentage of Hispanic voters, up in Germantown, in Long Branch. There are some others, but in terms of trying to draw a district around with enough people to create a full district, I think that you should look at the Wheaton, Aspen Hill, Glenmont area, which is what we did, and we created that District 6 from there. So that's how we took that into account.
Thanks. And last, with the high Hispanic populations of Gaithersburg, Montgomery Village, and Germantown, what are the implications of splitting those communities, given that they closely identify with each other?
Okay, so the most populated area in Montgomery County is Germantown. So Germantown is a bit of a challenge because it has the majority of the population living there. So it made it very difficult to keep Germantown and, for instance, Montgomery Village together. There are other, so let me say that comes back to the ground rules of compactness and contiguity. So there are, for instance, other areas of population that are very far apart. And if you try to put them together, it creates really these large or weirdly designed districts. So although there is a factor of that, and we're trying to protect and not split the populations, it's not the only factor. And that's an example of a push and pull with regard to what we can and can't do. If we wanted to give Up County 2 districts, we could not do that with taking Germantown out or adding Montgomery Village, because of the population numbers. A lot of it was really driven by the equal division of the population. And David, do you have anything to add?
Well, I would say this was probably the biggest point of contention on the commission. The majority of the commission felt that this map, this compromise map, had good representation for the Up County in both District 2 and District 7. We made a large revision from the first draft map we had in order to include the whole Damascus area into District 7, which put a much higher percentage of Up County voters into that district. This was a point of contention, still remains a point of contention amongst members of the commission, but the majority of the commission felt like we gave Up County representation in both District 2 and District 7.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you to all the commissioners. I just want to start and appreciate your service. This is not an easy exercise. It's never an easy exercise. The discussion of past efforts, certainly adding 2 districts, as was noted, made it increasingly more difficult, made the decisions much harder to address. So I really appreciate all of your work. It was thoughtful and detailed, and I know it was agonizing at times as you tried to come to a majority consensus, which is never easy. And I think each of us on the council can attest to the challenges of getting to a body consensus. So I just wanted to thank you all for your service in something that is very controversial and not easy. I did just have a few questions for the commission, and then perhaps one for staff. You started to speak to this, but could you just explain a little bit more? You mentioned, David, the note about Damascus and that change, but could you explain the maps 1, 2, and 3 that were presented to the public? I was going to say the penultimate meeting. I guess it was the one before that, since there was the final meeting to approve the report. But can you explain the changes from what the maps were that were presented, and then what the ultimate compromise was, and the rationale behind some of those major changes besides moving Damascus, which you just noted?
Yeah, so moving Damascus was one of the biggest changes, because we were trying to listen to the comments of that we were getting from Up County residents. Another major change we made was in District 4, moving District 4 so that it started at Tacoma Park and went up to North Bethesda. And maybe I can just use this opportunity, council member, just to talk about that decision. And I know that this is a new district. It does look a little weird. And I think will take some getting used to, as anything new will. But the issue here is there aren't enough people in sort of the southern part of Silver Spring, Tacoma Park, that area down there. So you need to move in some direction in order to get up to the number of people. We had to try to consider the map principles that I mentioned before, the lens on equity that we have, and of course the balance of the population that you need to met. So we worked through it. There were a couple different options about where to go. Should you go due west? Should you go northwest? Should you go into the east or into Wheaton? So you have to consider those possibilities when you're creating that district. In the compromise was that the commission felt that the best direction was to follow the transit route and the train tracks, go through Kensington and Garrett Park and up until North Bethesda. We thought that North Bethesda and Silver Spring, despite being new district mates, they actually do have some key commonalities. They contain some of the youngest census tracts in the county. They have the highest rental populations in the county. And Mariana said communities of interest are geographic, and that's true, but sometimes there are other communities of interest besides geographical communities. And I think when you really put your mind to thinking about it, and I've talked to a lot of people from Silver Spring and North Bethesda about this map, and I think when people put their minds to really thinking about it, I think if you drive from Tacoma Park up through to Kensington, I don't think it would be that weird for you to think that this is all one district. And so that was the other big change that we made, was to have that District 4 instead of going west as it was, going up northwest to North Bethesda. Now, of course, when you make any of those changes, as I mentioned before, Damascus or that or anything else, there are other changes that have to be made in order to balance the maps out. And so there were bunches of other small changes that had to be made in order to keep the populations balanced.
Appreciate the explanation. We're hearing a lot from residents in North Bethesda, as you know, that are very upset, and we're big blindsided by the change, and understand that they were caught up, I guess, in the compromise. But it's a tough explanation for residents to explain. So appreciate the fact that you've explained that there are no easy answers here. There's no good outcomes perhaps, but I did just want to note that we have received a lot of concern about that folks in North Bethesda historically was seen as Rockville, more recently has been associated with Bethesda, has never been even contemplated as part of Tacoma Park and Silver Spring. So that is something that I have been looking into personally, but understand the challenges that you faced in putting together the map and some of the compromises that had to be reached as you moved forward. This is for staff, perhaps. The raw data, is that going to be made available at any point to residents who have expressed a desire to explore the recommended map and possibly make suggestions to the council of tweaks to the map?
Pam, you're muted.
Sorry about that. As most people, hopefully that are following this are already aware, we do have an online interactive map, and that's on the commission's webpage. Part of that does give a lot of population and demographic data by the new district. It doesn't give it at the precinct level, and so we'll have to talk to planning staff about seeing about loading that in and what that requires and how easy that is to use. It would still, it would not be interactive in the sense that somebody could change a boundary, but what they could do is they could look at population data along edges, but they couldn't, the interactive map won't be the tool that's been used by the commissioners, because that would not be practical to have online and possible at this point. But we could try to get the population data by precinct.
Well, I think absolutely as much data as we can provide to the public is critical. If we're asking them to weigh in on a map, they have to be able to, work with the map to make suggestions that can be acted upon by the council. Is there a reason why we didn't use open source data for this and an open source tool? I mean, is that not available? Is there no open source tools?
I will say that the last time this was done, we had the planning department create a specific tool for Montgomery County and for the commissioners to use. And this was done the same time in this framework. I'm not sure what it means by saying open source, something that wouldn't have Montgomery County specific data or would possibly be more difficult to use. I know that what the planning department did was to provide something that was very dedicated to us, and so therefore very easy to use. It also came with great demographic and statistics that allowed the commissioners to not only create and draw these districts, but it immediately showed them what was the result of any change in population and in demographics. I don't know if David wants to weigh in about what something different would mean. I know that the tool for some commissioners was hard, but I believe that the streamline and the dedication gave to this tool from the planning department, I'm sure made it easier.
Well, David, you teach this for a living, so maybe you can enlighten me and the rest of us here.
I certainly don't want to disparage any from the planning department, because they put together a good tool that was usable. Commissioner Friedson is correct that there are open source software that could have been used. We didn't use it, and I think we didn't use it honestly because we didn't use it 10 years ago, honestly. But 10 years ago was different. I mean, I guess, council member, I think it's a longer question for the next commission about the better ways to do this, so that it would be easier for the public to interact with the map than what we have. But I do think the tool that we had, we were able to use it specifically with the communities of Montgomery County and come up with this map. I think 10 years from now, we really need to be thinking about using tools that are much more easy to share. And that's just my public view. But I don't want anybody to interpret that as me criticizing the planning department at all. I mean, they came up with a very good tool that we were able to use and constructively come up with this map and consider all the populations, the communities of interest, the demographics, and so forth.
I appreciate that. I don't want to be overly critical either. I do think that because we did it 10 years ago is never a good answer for us, and not an acceptable answer in any circumstance. So, as part of this, I think certainly moving forward, that needs to be a requirement for the next time this group is convening. I don't think it's any consolation perhaps to residents today, and it may not help us as we make these decisions now. But I do think that we should do a post-mortem report and look at the things that could have been done differently. And I think certainly that is one of them, any situation where community members can't directly engage, don't have all the tools and powers to weigh in as commissioners do, I don't think is acceptable. And so we need to fix that for moving forward. So I just want to note that. I'm sure there are other aspects that commissioners probably noted as we went through the process, and I think it'd be really helpful for the commission to be charged with that, to help us as we navigate moving forward as it's fresh and as you have just gone through the process, and just appreciate that, and anything that we can do in the meantime to provide the data that is required to help residents engage in this process as we're asking them to weigh in, I think is going to be really important. So if we could figure out what is the best in the circumstances we have now, and then look to doing it better and differently next time, I think would be helpful. But with that, I just want to end again thanking the commissioners for all of your service and all of your work. It's easy to criticize what boundaries would be changed or what isn't perfect, but there's a lot of tremendous work here, a lot of competing interests that had to be balanced, and I think you did a really outstanding job getting to a good place, and now we're going to have to make some tough decisions on our end as well. Thanks very much.
Well said. And I think we picked the right people for the commission, colleagues. Councilmember Novato.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. And thank you to the commission, and thank you to our staff, Ms. Dunn and Ms. Science. I'm in awe of how dedicated the members of this commission have been. It's definitely amazing the amount of hours that you spent. I was only able to join briefly in a couple of the meetings to just listen in. And I also was able to join in a couple of meetings where you were presenting to the community, trying to do it a little bit incognito, but then Mr. Jeru Bande called me out once. But I wanted to listen to see what it was that the community was expressing, and to really get a sense of the puts and takes, and also some of the perceptions and some of the facts. And there is no doubt that this exercise, in my opinion, mirrors a lot of what we are facing in our county, which is this extraordinary growth. And yes, thinking about 2010, as Councilmember Rice pointed out, is I was elected in a special election. I started to represent my district, which had basically most of the East County for a year and a half, and I got really attached. And then when the Redistricting Commission came through and put forth its map, then I lost all of that area. But I did gain all of Olney, and I did gain Wheaton, for example. And although it meant that I had to retool, et cetera, it was a smooth process. But of course, we were talking about 5 districts. At that time, the commission had to take into consideration the growth in the county and figure out how to distribute that evenly. So it was not what you guys had to do. And I can only imagine if 9 districts would have passed, how extraordinarily challenging that was going to be for all of you. So I take my hat off. I salute you. Again, to me, this is in many ways historic. When I look at the map from an objective perspective, given the rules that you had to follow, it's so historic and groundbreaking for Montgomery County to know that now we have a district that has a pluralidad, I'll say it in Spanish, of our Black residents and also of Latino residents, that the rest of the districts are majority people of color, and we have District 1, which is majority white. That mirrors the trends that we have seen happening in the past decades. The fact that there are these 2 up-county districts also, for me, it seems like such an important accomplishment. Because there is no doubt that these are communities that continue to grow as well. And as they continue to grow, they also want to make sure that there are these opportunities to have this type of representation that reflects their community. And so that is also really important. But I'll be honest, I totally understand that there are a lot of questions and there are a lot of wishes. And I think a lot of it's because we do get attached to our neighborhoods and identity and perceptions and things of that sort. But I'm also very mindful and respectful of everything that you had to take into consideration to come up with this proposal. Mind you, we are basically 7 months away from the primary. So folks who are stepping up and want to serve and are running for these districts don't have a lot of time to figure out where they're going to be. And so when we start talking about tweaking, I think I want to be also mindful, and I'm saying this to myself as well, that they're not minor things. I think as it was, expressed by the commissioners, you start tweaking one place, you have to tweak another, etc. And there it goes, the process. And if it took all of you, all this time, 11 meetings and then 40 community meetings to do this, imagine what it would take us when we also have a lot of other things on our agenda. So I just want to be cautious about what that means. But at the same time, also understand that this is historic. We're going to 7 districts. This is the start of something that I think will shape the future of the county. So I don't have questions because, like I said, I've been, paying attention for this whole time. Only to say that, again, I appreciate all your effort. And for our community who has been chiming in, and I totally understand as well, I think that the most important piece to remember here is that this is to determine geographic areas for councilmanic districts. We also have 4 at-large members. And at the end of the day, there's going to be a lot more representation after all of this. So rest assured that things will be, things will be okay, and that democracy will continue to be what it is. And the representational democracy, which in my opinion is so important, I think has really been demonstrated by what this commission has put forth. So again, thank you, and I look forward to engaging in the further conversation and hopefully passing this quickly, because like I said, I know that there are folks out there wondering where they're going to be and how can they then launch their own campaign to start talking to constituents about their desire to be representatives of these districts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Great appreciation for the commission members. Took on a very complex task and I think produced a very strong proposal here. I wanted to just mention, at one point it was stated that I think the new District 5, that Kemp Mill is together. I am hearing from some of the residents there that that they're seeing it a bit differently. That Kemp Mill, that it's not kept whole. So I just want to flag that and ask that we take a close look. I can see how it's hard to change big pieces, without redoing the whole map, but some of us are certainly hoping that some of the very small ones can be also fixed. So I want to take a look at that. And generally speaking, if you could just share with us process. So council staff has the data and council members can ask to see, a revision. Is that how it goes from here? Or, we're receiving this now and it's in our hands. So Pam, maybe you could just share with us.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Yes, as Councilmember Friedson recommended, that the precinct level population data get added to the interactive map. I've already sent an email for that. But I do have access to the precinct level population data. So if a council member wants to look at a tweak along a boundary edge, I can do that. And I'll also consult with the commission map makers just to make sure they're in agreement with analysis that I put together. But it would basically look at how it would change the population in the district receiving the precinct, the population changes in the district that's losing the precinct, what that does for the standard deviation of each of those districts, and what it does to the total deviation across all districts. If in fact you end up changing either the most populated or least populated district, you'll have a problem there as well. If it means changes to multiple districts, then that gets complicated. Again, all those same things would apply, but it's a lot of moving pieces when we can look at it.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's work. Really do. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too just want to extend my appreciation to Chair Cordier and all the commissioners that are here, and also Ms. Dunn and Mr. Zients also for helping staff there. I have been following your work from afar over the interwebs over the last number of months, and I didn't know what to expect watching you all start off this process. I mean, folks have been saying that this is a compromise map. And the reality is of course, it's a compromise map. There are 4 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 2 independents, 2 unaffiliated, and 1 libertarian on this commission. By definition, you are all going to work together to try and produce the best map that is in the best interests of Montgomery County residents. And I appreciate that. And I applaud you all for your work. And sure, I think everyone agrees it is not perfect. And I appreciate Councilmember Reamer, pointing out one community that has been contacting us, and that's Kemp Mill, and Councilmember Friedson mentioning North Bethesda and Bethesda communities. And of course, there's also Durwood. And we've been hearing from a number of communities that have some questions. And so part of this process is trying to demystify the process that you've all been working under. But as I understood it, I wrote a note and said that you had 400 public comments throughout this process. Is that right, Madam Chair?
Yes, that is correct.
Awesome. And another thing that I'd seen was about up-county representation. And while one of the districts is, the base is solidified, the population base is in Clarksburg and Germantown, the adjoining district has Montgomery Village, Damascus, and Goshen as well. And I think by anyone's account, that would be up-county. And because of population, it needed to extend to Olney or somewhere else, because we know that geography is not population density. And so I do think that the more information residents could have in terms of where the precincts are or whatever the geographic areas that were mapped for people to be able to see what the corresponding geography means in terms of density, I think that's helpful. But one of the things I found most interesting about the process was I know that there were 3 maps at the end, but 2 of them really had the most support. One, the map that's been presented to us, but there was a second map as well. And if memory serves, in both of those maps, the new district, I think it's District 4, that stretches from Tacoma Park and Silver Spring through Kensington and North Bethesda, that those maps looked almost identical. Can someone just explain that or share some of that thinking with us?
Sure, David.
Yeah, that's true. 2 of the maps had essentially the exact same district there. One of them was a little wider in the center than this one, but essentially they had the same conclusion. And I just think that goes back to what I was saying before, is you have to think about the various directions and think about where does it make sense to extend that population to get to 150. And 2 of the maps came to that same conclusion. Yeah.
So I just want to probe that a little bit more, Mr. Stein, and I know your deep knowledge in this issue with your classmate and with the students you teach and everything. But from a geographic perspective, how is it that 2 almost entirely different maps can have a nearly identical district?
Because when you look at the limitations of where that district could go, and you say, okay, we wanted to preserve that East County district that Councilmember Navarro was talking about, or the Wheaton district that she was talking about as well. Once you limit those out, now you don't have that many choices left as to where it's going to go. And so the map writers drawers of both of those 2, both of these 2 maps came to the same conclusion. There are not an infinite number of directions you can go. And so it doesn't surprise me too much that you would get two maps that came to that exact same conclusion.
Sure. Well, thank you for that. I mean, I get it, and when there's so many different other demands and thoughts, you do what you can with what you've got. And I think it was you, Mr. Stein, who had said that the district stretches from Tacoma Park up to Kensington and forward, up to North Bethesda. And as Councilmember Navarro was recalling the district that she was elected to when she first got to the council, a Tacoma Park to Kensington district is very similar to the one that former council member Irvin, a member of the commission, represented when she first got to the council. So what's old is new again in some respects, plus we were adding 2 new districts. And the way that you described that district, Mr. Stein, is saying that the tracks was the spine, or I'll insert spine, but that's what I heard. I would call that the Mark Line district or the CSX district, right? If that is really what connects the top to the bottom there. But I'll end on this thought again, just recognizing that land mass does not convey population density. So however we're able to convey that to folks would be good. But while this map is not perfect, I think it accomplishes a lot, though there is one thing that this map cannot manifest that is needed on the next council, and that is more women. And so while we have accommodated for many other things, I hope that the voters of Montgomery County can accommodate for that as well. So we have gender parity here. And with that, I thank you all for your work and for the continued conversations that we'll be having over the next few weeks. I yield back.
Thank you. Council Vice President Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Boy, it is clear that you all took this charge seriously and that you did it in a way that was deliberative and authentic, and both the depth and breadth of the discussion and discourse is truly remarkable, and it's just reason 1,275,000 that I love this county. It's just, you are all outstanding professionals and individuals, and your unique perspectives, both professionally, personally, culturally, ethnically, and geographically, came through in spades. And it's just very obvious to me that you guys worked as hard as anybody could have imagined. And let's remember, let's keep score at home. You did it in the middle of the pandemic with unknown data and analysis from our census because of the rigmarole at the federal level. And you were also able to do this in an entirely new environment than 10 years ago. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, none of those things are what they are today. And we also have an unusually toxic political environment at the national level, which fortunately has not bled through in the way that it has in other jurisdictions, but let's be honest, it's there. And we're also in the midst of yet another significant change and transition in the demographics of our community that really represent positive change in so many different ways. So I was really impressed with both the end product, with understanding that there are communities that feel strongly that this is not representative of what they would have liked to have seen. But on the whole, you just have to provide that context. And speaking of context, I suspect this particular hearing has probably got a few more viewers than our average hearings. And for the public at home, I had a front row seat for 12 years to the work of the council, and am now obviously in the room, as they say, over the last 3 years. The synergy between at-large members and district council members is real, and it works. And I have always been tremendously impressed at how my district colleagues have been able to balance the needs and the interests of their respective districts and connect those to the needs and the interests of the entire county. And I have never felt at any point that we were too parochial and that people in some nefarious way were not willing to be collaborative. And so I'm excited that there are going to be at least 5 new council members in this next council. And I think this sets us off well to be able to continue the tradition of previous councils in working through that synergy. I have every degree of confidence that that's going to happen. And frankly, you all have laid the groundwork for it to happen, because while there are, certainly some discussions that we have to have, I think on the whole, even people who generally disagree with their specific issue will agree that on the whole, you all have done an outstanding job. So thank you for that. I did just have two questions for context. So, and Councilmember Glass mentioned that there were more than 400 comments or suggestions over the course of your very impressive work. Can you describe a little bit for me what the process was to at least try and incorporate those thoughts or suggestions, or how? I know there were public hearings, but Ms. Cordier, if you can walk through for the public, because there are some that felt that they didn't have the opportunity to speak in the way they would have liked to have, but I know we went out of our way to try and make this as transparent as possible, but also as accessible as possible. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Sure. Just to clarify, the commission never had an official public hearing. What we did was we had an outreach process where we would go wherever we were invited to, and we created a spreadsheet and we listed out the name of the organization and which commissioners would be able to attend. We created a PowerPoint after we had done the initial education piece of, not just to the public that was watching, but for ourselves with regard to the laws and integrity of process and the ground rules. And so we put together the PowerPoint so that every presentation that was given to the stakeholder groups that were inviting us got the same information uniformly across the board. And it kept also the commissioners on, the message of what we could share. We could not get engaged with the community about, well, where do you want the lines, or how are we going to draw the lines? And particularly because, we did not have the census information. And so we managed to have 40 of those meetings, hearings. I wouldn't call them hearings, I'd call them meetings, where we showed up via Zoom. There were a few that were in person, and we would talk to the community with the PowerPoint presentation, and then we would listen. And that was probably one of the most important aspects of it, is we would listen to the input and the concerns of the public, and then we would share that with each other, and we were able to that's how we knew what was important to Up County and frankly to all of the areas in the districts. And that's why I think we felt the majority comfortable with the decision to vote Rockville and Gaithersburg to be kept together. And so when we presented, or when the commission saw the first three maps that were I think that's the October 6th meeting, we showed the first three maps, and that's what the public comment came in. And so from when those maps were shown to just before the next meeting with the tweaked maps, a lot of the comments and information that was provided was taken into consideration when adjusting the maps. So the 400 comments for the council to understand was put into a spreadsheet for us, and all the commissioners had access to it and reviewed it. I know I reviewed it. I know David reviewed it. A number of us did. And so what we could accommodate and what was really hard to accommodate and wasn't going to be possible if we stuck to, our ground rules. And, for the public to understand, why are the ground rules so important? That keeps us from gerrymandering a map, because, you could legitimately have maybe perhaps a concern or a preference and not realize that the end result in allowing that to happen without taking into consideration the equal population, the communities of interest, the continuity, the compactness, you could actually end up with a map in good faith, but gerrymandered. And that's my goal as chair of this commission, was to make sure that we did not do that. And so, and I think we managed not to do that. And so that's how we came about in making the outreach. The charter, the county charter, does not provide for the commission to hold a public hearing. And it was part of the decision of the majority not to hold a public hearing because it was not part of the charter. And as all of you can understand, that the public hearing aspect is really in the charter is the county council's purview. And so a combination of the shortness of time, combination of the fact that it's not in the charter, and the fact that we were sticking very closely to what the charter charged us with to do, was why a public hearing wasn't held. But we did do 40 outreach meetings with both parties, Democrats and Republicans, and other groups that were not necessarily affiliated to any one party. So I think we really had a good opportunity to really reach a lot of people. I did the one for the women, the League of Women Voter. And when I did that presentation and information, they had 130 people watching. And when I saw the numbers, I was floored at how many folks watched this on redistricting. So I think we really made a colossal effort to reach out, and did reach out and touch, most of the public. We probably missed a bunch as well. But I think the community's participation and comments really boil down to certain issues. And so, and some of them you've already mentioned, the concerns of the certain areas that find themselves maybe in a different district than they were before. But what I would like to emphasize is that these are 7 new districts, and there's going to be some growing pains and some compromises. But I think that in the sense of the democratic process, everyone is going to be represented.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And we were very intentional in ensuring a diversity of opinions and perspectives when we appointed all of you, which is, also really important. Final, just 2 thoughts. The first is I appreciate Councilmember Navarro putting in a plug for us voting on this as soon as possible. I couldn't agree more. We have to allow those candidates to continue the long tradition of the strong democratic process we have here in the county. Ms. Dunn and Mr. Zients, what's next in terms of the next steps before the council? I'm familiar with them, but for our public to know, what's next?
What's next is on your agenda. You have to introduce a bill to actually adopt this map. That also triggers a public hearing that's required by the charter. So you'll make that introduction this afternoon. You'll schedule the public hearing. I believe it's November 18th. You then have work sessions and you adopt a map. If the council takes no action from the commission's transmission, the map that was presented by the commission comes into effect as a matter of law 90 days after. But you can affirmatively approve sooner. You can affirmatively choose amendments if you so choose sooner than 90 days from November 3rd.
Perfect. That's all I had. So thank you very much. I yield back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you. Well, first, Mr. Stein, can we audit your class? That's something I'd like to do.
Yes. Every other day at 7:45 in the morning, Montgomery Blair High School. You're always welcome, Councilman.
I appreciate that. I may take you up on that, sir.
Go Blazers.
Yeah, that's right. As a sociology major who did okay in his statistics course, I appreciate that a lot. And Ms. Cordier, I tuned into several of the sessions on YouTube. This council could take some lessons in Robert's Rules of Order and decorum as you managed the group of folks that was put together, that it was mentioned was very diverse and from different backgrounds. And so just hats off to you for your leadership as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. A lot of questions have been asked. I did want to make a couple points. One of my favorite quotes is change is hard at first. It's messy in the middle, but it's amazing at the end. And I think this map is a good illustration of that, in that this was always going to be difficult, right? And we're in the nation, in the county, in the state, we are dealing with changes in so many ways and so many different issues, and it's hard to change. Human nature abhors change. And it's going to be messy as the candidates figure it out and people get used to their districts. But I do think the work that you all put in to create a compact, contiguous, very representative as much as possible map within the confines of equal protection and all the rules that you had to look at. This was a heck of an effort. I think you're balancing so many competing interests. So I want to commend you on that. And, it has been mentioned we've been hearing from specific communities. And I think, Mr. Stein, you spoke to this. Of course, on the edges, there always could be, the community could be with the community immediately to the other side of them, and it would make more sense than the one to the right. And so if you made those, say we tried to address all the 5 or so communities that have expressed an interest, there would be 5 or 6 more communities that would then express an interest from the new change. And I think we're just not going to be able to make wholesale changes like that. And I think also for the process, you all are, it's been mentioned, I think Councilman Vice President mentioned this, how blessed we are to have the expertise and the level of input in cordiality that was demonstrated by everyone on your commission from differing viewpoints. And I think the work you did was very commendable. So I did want to ask one question. Were there any other areas? All right, well, let me ask you this. It's been mentioned by a couple colleagues, like maybe there's some things, the Kemp Mills was brought up and other things. Are there small things on the edges like that that were discussed and you weighed against them and didn't do it because for another reason? And could you give us some insight into that as some might be considering those types of changes? Whoever wants to answer that.
Mariana, can I?
Yeah, David, go ahead.
So I would say a lot of those smaller changes or smaller issues, although I hate to say that because it's not small for that community that we're talking about. So, but a lot of them have to do with the balancing of the populations. Okay, Durwood is a good example. I know many people in Durwood see themselves as tied to Rockville. But when we made that decision to unify Rockville and Gaithersburg, there are too many people to put Durwood in that district. And then you have something like Kemp Mill, where we made every effort to keep these communities intact. It's quite difficult to do because the communities, unlike a municipality, the communities in some extent are in people's minds.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
And so it's sometimes a little difficult, to describe those, but we made every effort within the GIS program we had to keep them intact. But it's difficult to make them all intact. And Kemp Mill is a good example of it. Okay, they are right. It is not, by our GIS software, it is not completely intact. But in order to switch that's going to require adjustments to a bunch of other districts in disparate parts of the county in order to keep those populations the same. I'm not saying that's impossible, but I'm saying for the council to do that, you can't just consider just that one little thing about Kemp Mill. You have to think about how that's going to affect all the others. And so I think those they're at opposite ends of the same district, the Kemp Mill and Durwood. And so in a way, they are also interacting with each other. Even though they're not necessarily next to each other. So it's a complicated problem to try to move one district over and keep the balancing of the populations the same.
Yeah, I appreciate that. As you were saying, the changes, Four Corners is another one. I've heard from people from all sides, every corner, four corners of Four Corners about where they think they should be based on, their sense of community. And I think that this was ultimately, there was going to be some change here. And as I said, change is hard. Really happy that, yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, so yeah, I mean, Four Corners is like, we took a logical division point, which was the Beltway. That it made sense to me. Okay, that we had the division going along the Beltway, but then again, people who are on one side of that division or another side of that division feel, perhaps rightly, that they're not in the district that they thought they would be in, even though we picked what we thought was a pretty sensible division point, which was the Beltway. That's the complications that you have.
Yeah, makes sense. That's the messy in the middle, and hopefully, again, amazing at the end. I think that's the best thing about Montgomery County is our so many great communities, and if this can help in some way to give representation in plurality form to our Latino and African American communities, which I think is a huge deal, but also recognize how intermixed many of our communities are, and have that kind of growing together and coalition building. And to Councilmember Albanaz's point, all council members work together despite district or at-large status. So I think this is going to be a good thing. Appreciate your efforts and your work for the entire commission. Mr. Chairman, Mr. President, I yield back.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And thank you to the entire commission, Ms. Cordier and Mr. Stein and everyone else on this call, and Ms. Dunn and Mr. Zients for all your hard work. This is truly something that and you probably do have to have the discussions right after this process. What's a better process for the next time it happens? And I agree with those thoughts, because while it's fresh in your mind, no system is perfect. This one was not. It's always going to be difficult. But this one, while it's fresh in your mind, so that the next group, when in the next 10 years, when this happens, that they might have a slightly easier way to go about this. As the current member, as the current representative for the 3rd district, I'm very pleased that you kept Rockville and Gaithersburg as one. I'm very sorry. I'm gonna in District 3 that losing my good friends from Leisure World or as a direct representative, and my friends from Aspen Hill and Redland, and we can go down that list as well. But the reality is that the district that I now represent, I was going to lose the district was going to lose about 50, 60,000 people in it. And so therefore, the people that you're having to move around has to come from somewhere. It's that blanket. If you move it from here, you have to figure out where it's going to be. And last week I mentioned that no compromise is perfect. And let me be Sidney Katz, who's quoting Sidney Katz. No, this compromise is not perfect either. I mean, it's not going to happen. But the reality is that so many people work together to try to come up with is the best compromise that could be possible. And when, I was born in Gaithersburg, and it was considered the up county. It was then. Now I think it's more considered a little bit more mid-county, but it's still the up county. There was a time that Montgomery Village had a Gaithersburg mailing address, but it was not in the city of Gaithersburg. There was Asbury, a very wonderful senior center in Gaithersburg, was not in Gaithersburg, and it was annexed. In fact, it was represented, I believe, in those days by Nancy Dasick. And once we annexed it, the next time it came in, it was in the 3rd district. So these things change. Change is never easy. And as I've told many of my good friends who have called and said, look, I'm sorry to lose you as a representative. They're not losing someone as a representative, to the point that's been made time and time again here. The fact that someone couldn't vote for you doesn't mean that they're not going to call you. The fact that somebody, I mean, I've had friends that have, grew up in Gaithersburg, moved to Silver Spring and call me and say, Sydney, what am I supposed to do? And we figure it out for them. We walk down in those days, you could walk down the hall and see another council member and say, by the way, can you, this is what's going on. So we're not an island. We are a big place, but we're not an island from each other. I do believe that the municipal boundaries are important, and it's easier in some ways to say that this is the municipal boundary of Rockville. This is the municipal boundary of Gaithersburg. It's not as easy to say that this is considered Germantown and this is considered Clarksburg, because they don't have an actual boundary. It's a mailing address. And because of that, it becomes a little bit more hazy, I guess, in some cases. But bottom line is that we are going to have a public hearing on this. We encourage people to give their viewpoint on it. But the reality becomes that if we're and to the point of Councilmember Navarro, the reality becomes we are running out of time to be able to figure out these districts. We need to do them as soon as we possibly can. And if there is something, if there's a community that has been split, we talked about Kemp Mill. I don't know whether it's been split or not. I haven't followed that. But if it has been split, then we should try our best not to have it as a split community. But then we also have to figure out what community we would be changing in order to get there. So I guess bottom line is when we can finally see what precincts we're actually dealing with, that might make it a little easier for us and the public in general to know whether or not they are or are not in these various districts. Because looking at the map as it exists today, it even becomes a little bit difficult, even for my district, because it's not only Gaithersburg and Rockville in my district, the municipal boundaries, but there's some things in between that aren't in the actual boundaries of the municipality. So, but bottom line, let me say, I sincerely applaud everything you did. I did my best to not be involved in the discussions, because I didn't want somebody to say I was attempting to influence you. But the bottom line is you all did a great job on a very difficult topic. So thank you very, very much. And I yield back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilmember. I think everything's been said. I'll just mention I have, this is an interesting experience. I have so much loyalty and investment spent over the last 7 years representing East County. And I remember running there 7 years ago when it was outside my previous legislative district, and having so many community activists say, well, you don't seem like that bad of a guy. I think I'll support you as long as you're going to stick around, because we've had 6 council members in 12 years or so. And a couple of them are here, Councilmember Devato, Councilmember Irvin, Councilmember Branson, who I'm texting earlier today. All of us represented East County at different times. And as so proud as I've been to represent them, I think it makes so much sense. And so many activists there have told me how much sense it makes to them to have a community of interest that you all have kept together and created a real district just for East County that I think will really be, one of the many legacies of your project here. I think everything's been said by my colleagues, but I do want to echo everything that they've said about your dedication, your hard work, your commitment to the county and to democracy and to protecting all the communities of interest in our diverse and very complicated county. I think all the residents of the county are in your debt. And I do want to mention all the commissioners by name, because I don't know when we're going to see you again, but I know all of us are very grateful for your hard work, and everybody in the county should be. So Chair Cordier, Mr. Ahmad, Ms. Ard, Ms. DeShear, Mr. Edmonds, Councilmember Irvin, Mayor Goldenson, Mr. Maxstein, Ms. Rubin, Mr. Statland, and Mr. Stein. Thank you all so much for all your hard work for the county. We'll see you again in 10 years. for the next round.
What?
Oh, I didn't tell you? It's in the fine print.
I saw some head shaking, Mr. President.
No, but we're very, very grateful. We look forward to taking this up, and you made our job much easier. So thank you for doing that as well.